the Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce X2360 isn't really a new cooler on the market, but it does sit up there with some of the more premium feature-rich models. It comes with the new Easy Chain mag, so it eliminates fan wires connected to each individual fan. It also comes with the Gigabyte's new fan blade design, which includes new fin tips as well as the FDB bearings on the motors, which aims to reduce fan noise. Both result in improved cooling and increased air volume. Of course, the cooler does come with some cool ARGB lighting across the fans and the lower half of the pump. The pump itself features the Aorus LCD Edge View screen with a fully customizable display controlled through the Gigabyte Control Center. The display's LCD is also round and 360-degree rotatable, so you can install the cooler in any position without worrying about which way is up and down, although the brand still recommends installing the cooler towards the RAM, which is likely how you'll install it anyway. But the cooler is more than just a flashy display for your PC. The Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce X2360 has seen improvements across a number of specs. The pump has been increased by 8%, the pump has a 44% improved flow, there's a 3% increase in fin contact, and an overall 4.2% improved cooling efficiency compared to the previous model. So while the improvements are visual, there's a lot going on under the hood too. In this review, I'm going to unbox the Aorus Waterforce X2360, install it on my PC, and run a few tests just to see how well the hardware works. Unboxing the cooler reveals everything you need to install the cooler and get it up and running. There are three 120mm ARGB fans that can speed up from 800 RPM to 2400 RPM. These fans include an FDB bearing type and a promised noise level of below 37.5 decibels when running on default. From a glance, these fans look like your everyday cooler, but getting up close to them, you'll see the new fin design on the edges of each blade. You'll see how the lower half of the fans flare out and feature a serrated edge. They look pretty cool and sort of like a dagger from a video game. Fans also include a magnetic connection, and all three can be tethered together with a single wire. The only wire you'll connect is on the leftmost fan. The wire is connected to a rectangular hub-like box, which is included in the package. I will get into all of that in a bit. The box also includes the cooler pump and radiator. At first glance, I noticed how much thicker the piping was. It helps with the flow. The cooler also has a USB wire coming out of it alongside a power connector. The radiator itself also has two wires coming out of it, which at first glance is strange, but these wires are important for that rectangular connection I mentioned earlier. These wires connect the radiator to the fans, so the only wire going into your PC is essentially the USB header one. It is honestly such a dream come true for cable management. The box also comes with socket mounts for the Intel 2066, 1366, 115X, 1200 and 1700. As for AMD, which is the socket I have, it supports TR4, AM4 and STRX4. There are also screws for the installation and a tube of thermal paste. Gigabyte recommends you use the specific thermal paste as the brand claims the paste provides a 4.2% improved cooling efficiency. But I decided to finally use the colored thermal paste that Cooler Master sent me last year. I've had this thermal paste on the shelf for months and I haven't had the opportunity to use it yet. I mean, how many coolers does one install in their PC? This pack comes with a range of vibrant thermal paste tubes including yellow, blue, green and more. I used the blue tube. It doesn't really matter what color you end up using though. They all pretty much work the same and you'll likely never see the color of the paste you use until you have to remove your cooler again. Usually installing a water cooler in a PC takes the most amount of time. This is because all of the horrible wires that are needed for the fans and motor. However, the Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce X2360 was really easy. I mounted the cooler onto my Aorus C700M case and specifically used the front mount. I then magnetically connected all the fans together and screwed them onto the case. I then installed the AMD bracket onto my X870 Aorus Wi-Fi 7 motherboard and attached the metal to the back. I applied the thermal paste to my CPU and clipped on the pump. The last thing was simply connecting the pump to the motherboard through the USB header and then connecting it to the power. Two very easy steps. This was likely the easiest cooler I've ever installed and it just worked. This is thanks to the cable-free installation that didn't have me unplugging and plugging in addressable header cables into every socket to try and get it to work. The single fan going into the one connector also makes a huge difference, as you don't need to keep track of 3 fan cables throughout your whole installation process. When it comes to the Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce X2 360 performance, the first thing I wanted to do was fiddle around with the Gigabyte control center. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the brand's software at all. It is likely the worst on the market. It is clunky, obtrusive, and desperately needs a revamp. However, the software is still needed to tweak the cooler, the lighting, and the LCD panel. You'll also need to update the cooler's firmware when you first install it in your PC. Once I was up and running, the software let me tweak the overall visuals of the entire cooler. There are some great preset settings called Enthusiast, and each of these come with various toggles to display certain stats. Enthusiast 4, for example, has 4 customizable corners, and each can display one of the 6 available stats. These include fan RPM, pump RPM, CPU temperature, CPU clock, CPU usage, and CPU power. So if you're benchmarking your CPU, you'll then want to set each corner up to display all 4 CPU stats. I could then add a custom image or video to the cooler too. This allowed an up to 10 MB file to be added to the storage, which would loop on the 40 MB ROM. When it comes to the general performance, I benchmarked the AMD Ryzen 9900X3D. I recently upgraded to the CPU and it was the best time to test it out. The CPU is a Zen 5 gaming beast with 12 cores, 24 threads, and a max boost clock of 5.5 GHz. It includes 960 KB of L1 cache, 12 MB of L2 cache, and 128 MB of L3 cache. The CPU has a 120 watt default TDP and a max operating temperature of 95 degrees. Here are some of the results I had from the various tests that I ran with the cooler. Keep in mind that I did test the CPU with and without PBO enabled. I also enabled X3D Turbo mode. On turbo with the pump on high performance, I measured 60 decibels, which is quite loud. The pump has a low hum to it and I could hear it over my case fans. When I set the fan and pump speed to default, the noise level was much lower at 37 decibels, with the fan spinning at 1900 RPM. So this component can definitely get noisy when you need the performance, but at the same time, the pump and fans also provide a somewhat quiet experience when set to default and silent. With performance boost overdrive disabled and thermal caps removed, I managed to peak the AMD Ryzen 9900X3D to 83 degrees Celsius. This was using 195 watts of power on the CPU, and the cooler was at 2550 RPM on the fans and 3250 RPM on the pump. Keep in mind that I didn't intentionally want to overclock the Ryzen, I just wanted to see at default if the cooler was able to keep the CPU running at lower than 95 degrees Celsius out of the box. Considering it hit 83, I would say it's pretty capable. Overall, the Gigabyte Aorus Waterforce X2 360 is a capable cooler that not only performs very well but looks cool and made quite a huge difference with my cable management. I managed to get rid of half my cables at the back of my case thanks to this cooler. It is on the pricier side of things, but it should last a few years before you needing an upgrade. The cable management alone is a selling point for me, as everything else was an added bonus. I do enjoy the RGB even though I disable it. The display is also clean and quite bright. I also enjoyed the different customization options and all the enthusiast default options that you can tweak out of the box. The unit did handle the AMD Ryzen 9900X3D without any thermal issues, and the CPU performed well at default with thermal protection disabled. I do think there's quite a lot of potential for this hardware combination to increase the CPU performance even more without the cooler buckling under pressure. Considering it could have hit 95 degrees Celsius and it wasn't able to out of the box, I think that's impressive. But I do worry about some of the bugs with the Gigabyte software though. I just feel like the cooler is often held back by the software and its dated, cumbersome design. But once you set up the cooler and everything is running, thankfully you seldom have to return back to the control center. So that's my experience I had with this Waterforce 2 X360 cooler and the AMD Ryzen 9900X3D. Huge thanks to both Gigabyte and AMD for sending over these components for me to test out. Be sure to check out the channel for loads of other Gigabyte content I've put up in the recent weeks. And visit Glitched Online for more gaming tech news and reviews. Until next time, farewell.